was in 1885 is when Kings County established what they call a lunatic asylum. And again, it was an interesting experiment because they were using some of the elements of the Muhlenberg experiment. The early hospital was set up in a farm setting, and they had, we would call them sometimes patients or clients, lived in little cottages, and then they helped to maintain that community.
The psychiatric center, when it was opened up, there was nothing out here. There was no electricity, there was nothing. And so they had to do everything for themselves. Once the psychiatric center began to be the main focus of the town eventually took on the name.
The impetus to building mental hospitals were horrific stories in communities of people with mental illness who'd be locked in shacks for years on end, or locked in a bedroom with no exercise, kept away from the world, shunned in a sense. Big improvement over sticking people in poor houses or the basement of 18th century hospitals, chaining people.
It was thought that when industrialization came in and induced this rapid change, that somehow this rapid change was associated with mental illness, that the people who were, we would consider them, I guess, to use a general word, high-strung, had internalized the external chaos, this newly developing external chaos in the outside world. The solution to this by some 19th century social reformers was to try to recreate the stable relationships of agricultural society, to send them out into the country. And if you look actually at the schedules of the early mental institutions, you'll see that there's a real attempt to recreate the old stable agricultural order. The schedules are very, very precise about what you're going to be doing at what time. The buildings are symmetrical. Everything is done in a way that's designed to try to calm people down by making it feel this is going to be an oasis of sanity where none exists.
The Kings Park Psychiatric Center was formed about 1885 from the Kings County Asylum in Brooklyn. They were looking to come to another area where there's more of a park-like setting. They didn't have a lot of the medicines that we have today.
When the state hospital was built, there were hundreds and hundreds of jobs, more jobs than there were people in the community at that time. So families would practically get off the boat, so to speak, and move to Kings Park.
As long as you're willing to live out in the middle of nowhere, you can have a job. And that was the attraction to many of the immigrants. And that's how the town grew up around the hospital. A large part of our identity comes from the psychiatric center.
Whatever the mode of treatment, it's essential that it be supplemented by an atmosphere of security and calm. The effective hospital must always serve as a refuge for its patients, a place where they can live quietly during that period of reorientation in which they learn how to achieve a better adjustment to the world outside.
Occupational therapy was a key to the patient's mental health. All of the patients worked on this communal living to plant the vegetables, to weed the gardens, mowing the lawns, working in the slaughterhouse, preparing the food. They made their own electricity. They had their own sewage facilities. They made their own cheese. They even the manure from the farms that was used in the vegetable gardens.
I'd say 90% of the labor was patients. You know, the patients ran the powerhouse. They worked in the coal squad, shoveling coal. They worked in the laundry. You know, I'd say 90% of the bulk of the help in that big, massive laundry were patients. And most of the patients worked in the kitchens and dining rooms. And they do the worst of the work, you know, like unpacking sheets that were soiled and full of urine, and all that. And they got, all these patients, they only got, not cash, but they got a $15 club store card where they could take that card and take it to the community store and spend it. And $15 a month, working 5 days a week, all day long. But they were happy doing it. I mean, they weren't really forced.
Everyone was involved in occupational therapy because that was the philosophy at the time.
But that was an interesting experiment. And we sometimes forget that they were using the St. John model.
And then I think in the early 70s, they did away with patient labor, basically. And they hired more help.
And after that, they started to think of things for the patients to do, basket weaving and little things, but they're all make work. There has to be a value to what you're doing. And that adds a lot to your sense of self-worth and self-satisfaction. And so when they stopped the patients from working for weeks and even years, the patients would show up every day for work.
There were still some patients on the wards, individually and off the record, that loved to work. If patients didn't work or weren't on work squads, like out cutting grass and that kind of thing, they would just wander the day room, pace back and forth. I remember they used to, for polishing a floor, they'd make these concrete blocks and wrap a blanket around it with a big wooden pole. So for the patients that were active, that loved to pace all day, and many of them did, they'd talk to themselves and they'd pace. They'd give them one of these big concrete block with a blanket and the pole, and they'd push it back and forth to shine the floors.